This is a David Pakman video, and apparently he talks with a former Republican from the White House. All right, let's hear it.
Substack Live with former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger. In the conversation we're about to hear, he explains why he never plans to vote Republican again. He talks about his new documentary. He explains his perspective on the Groyperism that is infecting the Republican Party and a lot of other stuff. This was a great conversation with former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. It's great to speak today with former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, also a veteran, joining us on Veterans Day, and we thank him for his service generally, and I specifically do, because for every person that chose to do it, it made it less likely I would have to. And for that, I am extremely, extremely grateful. Really good to talk to you. I'm glad we're able to do this.
Yeah, you too. By the way, I always want to say, thank you for paying your taxes, because that allowed me to fly America's airplanes. It was the best gig I've ever had in my life. And I kind of miss it. I had to retire. I kind of miss it.
Well, I contributed, I guess, in some way, some small way then.
There you go.
The documentary about you, really, is The Last Republican. It was produced by our friends over at Midas Touch under the Midas Studios umbrella. And it's really interesting. I encourage people in my audience to check it out. It's really, listen, I in a sense, it's sort of the movie equivalent of like Kamala's book and Jonathan Allen's book and Jake Tapper's books. These are books that people who follow the political space would be very interested in, and the film is sort of an audiovisual representation of that. I think my audience would find it really interesting. A couple of the things I want to ask you about. One is the film does portray a number of different tensions. And so, for example, there's the tension between the Republicans who knew something was wrong, but didn't feel compelled to be public about it, and those who did, those who are in the sort of true believer category, and those who, like you, sort of thought more for themselves. Can you give us a little bit of the...
Jesus. Oh, man. I'm fucking exhausted. About to keel over.
Lay of the land in the party at the time that the election fraud claims were going on, at the time that the January 6th committee was going on? Like, how divided was the Republican Party really?
Really divided. And by the way, everybody watching it, it's more than just a political documentary too. There's a lot of human elements, and I would encourage Apple TV, Amazon Prime. And I have no financial interest in it too, so make that clear. But look, the GOP really, since the day I got elected, so I was elected in 2010. We were battling the far right in the party, and initially the far right was, just a small part. I always make the joke, like, we do these things called Lincoln Day dinners, where it's the fundraiser for the county and the county party, and there was always like one table of weirdos, right? And so that was the weirdo table. But over time that grew, and then when Donald Trump came, that exploded, right? And basically that became mainstream. So after the election, the night of the election, Trump comes out, says, frankly, the election has been stolen from us, right? And that's where I'm like, dude, we have to speak out on this. The one thing about democracy that you need, the only thing, honestly, is a trust that the system to count votes works. That's it. Everything else you can disagree on. And
that he is spot on that. I think people don't realize that institutions, the bedrock of why they exist and the important value of what they provide for a society is the people's trust. And if it loses the people's trust, then the society will fall apart. There's no doubt about it. Society will fall apart.
And so I started speaking out, and most of the people in the GOP, at least on the House side, agreed with me. About half of them would speak out. The other half were like, oh, just wait till December 15th when it's official, and then he'll acquiesce. And then it became, oh, just wait until the turn of the year. And then, oh, just wait until January 6th. And what you see is just this absolute, cowardice, right? And so there became really strong tension eventually to where it culminated, with the impeachment vote.
Cowardice. You hear that? You hear that? These Republican congressmen are fucking cowards. And that's just not me saying it. That's a former Republican congressman saying it.
And then there was that intervening time between basically January 6th and the very beginning of February, where I think the party could have gone a very different way. And I was trying to get the other 9 people that voted to impeach with me to basically take over the party, to just kind of declare like, hey, this, we're in charge now, right? Because we needed to take out Kevin McCarthy. He's the one that helped the lead of this. And the other 9 impeachers, unfortunately, were all saying like, hey, this is time to just heal the party. And everybody, really, to be fair, everybody thought Trump was done then. Everybody. Nobody showed up at Andrews when he left. But the thing that changed it, and the guy that owns Donald Trump's resurgence, is Kevin McCarthy. Because when he went down to Mar-a-Lago, when he got his picture taken with Donald Trump, the party's like, well, I guess it's Trump, and everything turned on a dime. And so, yeah, tons of tension, particularly then when I got on the January 6th committee. I mean,
Interesting. So when McCarthy fell in line, that's when everything changed. And now he has Mike Johnson, who pretty much is a stooge dick sucker. Interesting. I mean, the Speaker of the House, it has so much power, right? Leading Congress being in a branch that's supposed to challenge the executive. But Trump really has control over all three branches and the top leaders of all three. It's crazy.
basically became persona non grata. I'm still friends with the people I was friends with, but politically, you're basically kicked out.
Were there people back channeling with you saying you got to get out of this January 6th committee thing? Or was it basically like, as people saw that you were speaking out and scheduled to be on it, it was sort of like people knew there was no talking you out of it?
Yeah, they knew. I mean, because the fact that I made the decision to get on it, I mean, that was, I equate it politically to like, hey, take that hill. You're not going to make it to that hill, but the guys behind you might, right? And so when you make that decision, they know. And plus, these folks know that I was always kind of I'm not saying this to sound like Jesus, but like a man of conviction, right? If I had my mindset to something, I do it. And look, here's the thing. The oath that you take, I think, forced you to have to vote to impeach and, to serve on the committee of fast. Unfortunately, there were only two of us that made that decision, but the oath is very clear: defend the Constitution. And that day, the Constitution wasn't defended. So
this former Republican, I have to say it loud and clear for the MAGA people who refuse to acknowledge that Donald Trump is not a Republican and Donald Trump is un-American. I just want us to be on the same page here. And the people who capitulate to Trump, these people are selfish. These people care about themselves. They honestly, none of them deserve your respect. None of them.
But I would still have, for a while, it was maddening. People would come up to me and be like, hey, thanks for doing it. I can't do it because my district's too Republican, but thank you. And I'm like, dude, my district is like super Republican too, but okay, whatever makes you feel good.
There's this thing that
Coward.
definitely happens on both sides to a degree. And I'll give you an example from the left. I was just at Crooked Con in DC over the weekend. And I spoke to, I'm not going to out anybody, but I spoke to like 5 people, prominent either lawmakers or like podcast independent media people, who confided in me. My actual opinion about X thing is the following. I can't say that right now because the risk I would become PNG, persona non grata. And I think that this is terrible. It's a form of self-censorship. People in my audience, I think, would be shocked to hear who these people were and what the topics were. And I want
Guarantee abortion is one of them. Guarantee abortion is one of them. It just pisses me off that these people don't speak up. You're chosen to represent your location. Is staying in power more important than doing what's true? The problem is a lot of these politicians run for office and pitch these political ideas that they don't even really believe in. There's no integrity and honesty a lot of the times when it comes down to it. At least, at the very least, even though Donald Trump is a lying piece of shit, at least he was honest on how terrible and evil he was going to be when he became president. We need more honesty. We need more integrity.
When it came to that in the Republican Party at this time, was it about, I'm worried Trump will target me if I do this? I just want to maintain access to power if he eventually comes back into power. Like, what was the motivator for people who had an opinion, but they weren't saying it?
So here's the thing that I if I forget, remind me, because I'd like to come back to how you opened it. I've come to believe that people fear more than they fear death. They fear being kicked out of their tribe. They also fear when you're a person with a title. I mean, keep in mind, when you're a U.S. congressman, any room you walk into, except in the White House, you are the most powerful person in that room and probably the center of attention. That becomes a pretty powerful kind of identity, how you see yourself. So I think a lot of it was they were fearful because they knew that they would have to basically give up their job to do it. And there's a sense of, I'll be kicked out of the tribe, I'll be excommunicated. And that's a scary thing. Trust me, I've gone through it. It's not fun. I think there was some of that. There's also, yes, Donald Trump can make an example of me, but the thing people feared the most was the base. The base of Republican voters that Donald Trump had turned into a cult. I mean, let's just be clear. Not every Republican is in the cult, but every one of the hardcore MAGAs, it is. And what you see in...
Did you hear that? Did you hear what this former Republican congressman just said? Let me rewind it for people just in case they didn't hear.
Can make an example of me, but the thing people feared the most was the base. The base of Republican voters that Donald Trump had turned into a cult. I mean, let's just be clear. Not every Republican is in the cult, but every one of the hardcore MAGAs, it is. And what you see in
a cult, brainwashed cult.
Cult behavior, by the way, is you see a leader that basically creates this, do whatever I say, even if it doesn't make sense, you have that. But the one thing, and Democrats can learn from this, that Donald Trump does really well, is he forgives. Okay. So if you decide you want to come crawling back, I could do this tomorrow and I'd be in the White House tomorrow. If you decide you want to come crawling back, he'll allow you to. Now, the rule is you can never cross me again, but he'll allow you to come back. And that's a lesson to Democrats because, like, I interview people that leave MAGA all the time. And some of them just within the last few weeks. And the comments I get, from people that are, granted it's online, but it's just like, you should have known, to whoever I'm interviewing, or this is your fault, screw you. And it's like, listen, guys, I get it. And I think people that leave MAGA that want your attention have to admit that they were wrong, but we have to welcome them. I mean, because look, this last election we lost because we didn't have enough people. So unless we're just creating more people.
That one hit. I get it too. I see it all across the internet. They want to crucify these people. They say it's too late. When you're up against an existential threat, the dawn of destruction of a society that has lived for hundreds of years, a toppling of a nation that has dominated for so very long, sometimes you got to bite the bullet. Sometimes you got to hold your tongue. Sometimes, like Jesus said, you got to forgive. And I know it's tough. It is annoying how much bad rhetoric some of these people put out there. But in order to take out the ultimate evil, sometimes you got to work with evil. You got to do what you got to do. So, I know this is going to rub some people the wrong way. But open up the arms and accept Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm just saying, you're going to have to do it. That's how you win.
Out of thin air. We got to win people over. And I do want to touch on the thing about, like, the podcasting space and everything. I'm really worried about Democrats on that end. Obviously, the last two election cycles, I voted straight Democrat. I'm not going to vote Republican again. And so my real interest is helping Democrats, right? And winning the majority in the House and the Senate. This happened in the Republican Party, where there became this litmus test. And if you go outside of it or you have a different opinion, you lose donations, you lose sponsors, you lose whatever. And so you create a perfect environment for somebody like Trump to come along. And for Democrats, look, I've experienced this with my Substack, right? You write something that's not exactly in line or perfect, and people will, I'm unsubscribing, right? I'm leaving. I thought you were different. And that is a scary thing because, frankly, if you want to be a big tent party and you have to be to win, you've got to welcome some opinions that are not exactly lined up. I'm married, happily married. We don't agree on everything,
Hey, man, being the purple political breakdown, being the voice of no centered ideology that's not purely blue or purely red, the amount of people that I piss off consistently. I know people are so hell-bent to have like one way of thinking, and I just refuse to adopt that kind of philosophy. So I'm sure you may have seen one of my clips. You may have listened to a podcast episode, or you may have watched a video. Guarantee I've pissed off your side at some point. And I'm unapologetic. I don't give a fuck. If you don't like what I'm saying, then we can have a conversation. That's the reason why this podcast exists. That's the reason why this platform exists, is I'm trying to push conversation and push solutions forward. The ones that people are not talking about. The star voting. The Think. They got Future something, and they're a great program too. The paint that absorbs carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that helps deal with climate change. The parenting book that helps parenting in a way that is not strict but not super lackadaisical. I push solutions. I do that more than probably most content creators. I have no interest in playing the party line. I will say what I believe and I will talk with anybody to evolve those ideas, and I will call out evil when I see it, like MAGA. So it makes my channel unpopular. I get a lot of dislikes. I got a lot of people who are pissed about my opinions. But none of that is going to change. And all the people who like yell at me in the comments, I mean, I know none of them will actually like talk with me or debate me because they're scared. So it is what it is.
I'm going to make a small adjustment to my ring light. People saying I look too yellow. I don't want that. I don't want to look jaundiced today. I'm really interested in you saying you're never voting Republican again. Let me give you a little context for this, because this is a topic I plan to bring up. I've had Sarah Matthews on a couple times, who was deputy press secretary to Donald Trump towards the end alongside Kayleigh McEnany.
Great person.
And she basically said, I'm paraphrasing, that she is basically still kind of like a moderate Republican. And she didn't name these people, but I'll name them. If it was someone like a Mitt Romney or a John McCain or something like that, that would bring her right back to enthusiasm for the voting for those Republicans. Have your political views changed where you no longer see yourself even as like a moderate Republican?
No, look, I still believe what I've always believed, right? Now, the good thing when you kind of leave a party, so to speak, it gives you the flexibility to then kind of relook at what you believe, right? Because it would be like, let's take something like an issue that nobody knows much about, net neutrality, right? Okay, that's an issue. It was a big issue for a while. You kind of take a position based on, well, the party's kind of here, so I'm going to go there. And obviously you have pressure on issues. So it allows you to take a look at those things again. So I've even further moderated as a moderate Republican. But the party completely changed, right? And why I say, I guess I say I'd never vote Republican again, certainly not in the foreseeable future, because for me, it's like, let's say a Mitt Romney comes along, okay? Ultimately, even though I think Mitt is an honorable person and would be a good president, ultimately, he would be enabling a structure or a party that has made it very clear that they do not believe anymore in liberal democracy. And until that is pulled out root and stem, until that is burned out of the party, which it will be someday if the party wants to survive, then I can't support that, right? And then who would you be putting in power? Let's say Mitt Romney wins. Who would be Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, all that stuff? People that went along with Donald Trump. And to me, that is an unforgivable sin as long as they continue to say what they did was right. So that's the battle. I mean, it's like, do I agree with Democrats on everything? Obviously not. But I don't think any Democrat agrees with the Democrats on everything. But I definitely want them to win, because to me, I use the example, it's like being in a trench in Ukraine, okay? And I have a target, a bad guy 5 meters away and 130 meters away. All of our attention should be focused on the guy that's 5 meters away. The 30-meter guy you can deal with later, right? And that's where we're at. The threat, the 5 meter, is democracy. And all the stuff we may disagree on, I mean, we will sit around someday around a campfire because we don't have electricity anymore, wishing for the day we just simply disagreed on issues.
Do you have any opinion?
He's cooking. Ultimately, people think that I'm a Democrat. People think I'm liberal or left or progressive or whatever. And I don't really care if they think that. The only reason why you think that is because Republicans don't exist no more. There are forgotten species of individuals. Right now there's a cult called MAGA that is destroying the country. And this former Republican articulated that perfectly. In the foreseeable future, I can't see a normal Republican. Republicans deserve to lose for the next decade, arguably 2 decades, until we get a new crop of normal fucking Republicans again, where we can actually challenge ideas and evolve them, because there are people that actually care about things that are very reasonable, caring about the family, care about gun rights, caring about being pro-life, and that's a little bit more arguable, but that voice is also necessary in a conversation about abortion. So they're necessary. It's just they don't exist anymore. So he's cooking.
Inner sense of what is, quote, really going on with this sort of, how do I want to say it? There's this kind of like Groyper versus MAGA thing that's developing now, where people like Tucker Carlson have kind of treated with kid gloves this white nationalist Nick Fuentes. And even though I think now the president and vice president have denounced to some degree or done the whole, I don't know anything about it, that type of thing. Like, what do you think is not that Nick Fuentes is going to be the next nominee, he wouldn't even be old enough, but what do you think is the meaning of this thing that's kind of taking place here?
I'm glad you asked. And by the way, if you're a parent out there with a young kid, a young guy in your life, right, as a child, and it's appropriate. Look at what they're doing online. And I think generally that's good advice, but like this is deeper than I think a lot of people realize, particularly among young men. And this is one of my passions that I'm trying to focus on is why are we losing men? Why is the definition of first off, masculinity is not toxic. There is toxic masculinity, but masculinity is a great thing. But the definition has become among these groypers like it's yelling, it's punching down, it's being mean to women, it's putting women in their place, right? And what we need is good male leaders to come along and talk about what real masculinity is. It's like punching up, it's fighting for a cause, taking care of your family, etc. So what you're seeing is that groyper movement under Nick Fuentes kind of grew in the shadows because he used a lot of people's racial animus, animus against women. They talk about incels. So you get a lot of these guys that, I mean, we all in high school sometimes felt like we couldn't date women or whatever, but they used that anger and turned it into women don't deserve it. And so for a while, people have been kind of, by the way, Nick Fuentes went and had lunch with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. That's an important point to remember, with Kanye. But there's always been a firewall. On the far right, you have the elements of like racial Nazism, kind of like that. But there was a firewall in the right between that. So if a guy showed up like a neo-Nazi at a Republican party, they'd kick him out. That firewall is crumbling now. And the danger is because there's this saying in the GOP that like there are no enemies to the right. And what it means is if someone's to the right of you, common cause, they're an ally. And so you saw that with Heritage Foundation. You saw that with Tucker Carlson. And so what do I make of it? That this is a very dangerous moment where we are about to mainstream, or at least I will say, somewhat acceptable, people that are straight up neo-Nazis and racist. I mean, look.
Maybe tolerance is the right word. There's a growing tolerance.
Yeah, a growing tolerance.
I don't know.
That's a good way to put it. Think about this, man. Did you ever imagine that we would be a country that said, no more immigration, okay, no more immigration, but we're happy to have immigrants that are white from South Africa? That's our new immigration policy, right?
Yeah.
Or
those videos, by the way, the videos of the refugees from South Africa who are wearing cargo shorts and look like they're getting off of a mediocre cruise. It's surreal stuff.
It is surreal. And that, and who's the one driving that? Elon Musk. Why did Elon Musk kill USAID? Because it helps people that aren't white. I mean, that's what is really going on here. And I don't know, it's right. I never imagined the country.
Oh my God, this guy is cooking. We already knew this. I've already spelled this out several times of this like anti, it's like this white nationalist, Christian nationalist, identitarian philosophy of these are the right people that should be real Americans. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. Anybody who's not in that identity that's also fucking cooning out, you're wild too. It's crazy.
You would ever go back to like this?
Yeah. In thinking about 2028 a little, and I don't want to do a lot of this because I try to always keep my eyes on the next election, but I want to mention a little bit about it. In thinking about 2028, the polling is JD Vance's. At the same time, rarely is the polling 3 years out indicative of who ends up being the nominee. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. But there's a movement that's been writing to me saying it's going to be like a Marco Rubio type person, someone adjacent to Trump. But I think if it's not Vance, I think it's because there's been a revolt against everything Trump touched, and it won't be Rubio either.
Yes.
So in my head, I'm trying to say, what's more likely? An extreme right winger, if it's not someone from Trump's inner circle, or someone like a Romney? And I don't actually know the answer because I don't know what the Republican voters want.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you'd asked me this question a couple of years ago, I probably would lean more towards the GOP is going to touch the stove and then learn its lesson. Now, I still believe that. I just think it's going to be way in the future. The Republican Party has to lose elections, right? That's the deal. They have to lose the presidential election in order to kind of wake up. So I think this is part of why Donald Trump is being so cagey about running for a third term. I want to be clear to everybody, Donald Trump will not be president again. He can't run for a third term. It is clear in the Constitution. They're trolling. But the second he says, yeah, I'm not going to run again, all of a sudden he's a lame duck. And now there's
he says that, but then you got people like Steve Bannon going on the internet. I wonder if you guys saw this. Hold on, let me pull this up. You got people like Steve Bannon going on the internet going like, we got to figure out a way to get Donald Trump a third term. And one of the oh, did I see an interesting video? Hold on. Is that a Piers Morgan video? We might look into that. We might watch that. But some people are suggesting that the way that they get Donald Trump in is they have Trump be like a vice president or speaker of the house or some shit, and then everybody just quits, and then Donald Trump gets the job. I'm like, bro, what? Trump third term. Right here.
Well, a man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
And obviously, anybody who doesn't like what you say, but judges it as a function of a lack of intelligence, doesn't know anything about you. I don't make that mistake. You're a smart guy. Oh, you know he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it. I think we'll have a couple of alternatives. Let's say that. We'll see. We'll see what the definition. We'll see what the definition of term. We'll see what the definition of term limit is.
All right. Well, so you're talking about litigating this issue, because I don't want people to listen to our interview and say Bannon's cooking up an insurrection. Bannon is cooking up. You know what I mean? I want people to get a straight take on where your head is. What do you?
What is? You know what? I can't be mad at him for trying to break it down, because we need this. We need the receipts of these people saying these insane shit.
Chris, as you know, I've had greater long shots than this. When we supported President Trump after the election, I realize you don't believe the election in 2020 was stolen. We do. We fervently believe that. When President Trump went back to Mar-a-Lago on January 20th, 2021, he was the longest of long shots to return to the White House. We said that day in our podcast and doubled down, having President Trump's back, that he was coming back not just to win the primary, he would win the White House, and we had to get organized and drive that victory, and also start working on all the policies, what's called Project 2025 or the America First Policy Institute, but all those different think tanks that start.
He just admitted. Hey, MAGA, you still denying that Project 2025 is Trump's platform? Steve Bannon literally just said that's their platform. He just admitted it. They were lying this entire fucking time. These people are evil. Let's be very clear. MAGA is evil. The people in charge of MAGA are evil. They're not good people. They're evil people. It's just
putting in the policies that you're seeing today in what we call flood the zone or days of thunder or however you want to describe it. But this is many years in the making. So we've had greater long shots than Trump 2028, and we've got a lot of stuff we're working on there. We're not prepared to talk about it publicly, but in a couple of months, I think we will be.
So anybody going like, oh, he was just kidding. Oh, he said he's not part of Project 2025. Get your tongue out of Donald Trump's butt cheeks and spit out that shit that's in your mouth. All right, cool. Appreciate you. All right, let's go back to what we're watching.
Competition. You're already seeing this bubble up. You know, there was always this belief that like Rubio and Vance were buddies and they were going to run together. I'm already seeing stories leaked that Vance has leaked against Rubio, right? Particularly with Venezuela. And so that is going to be a battle in the party. And who is going to win? If I was a betting man and had to bet, I would say probably not JD Vance because he's not good, but somebody that like has that viewpoint. But I don't know, because Donald Trump is unique. He is uniquely able to like be shameless, and he's got a superpower. We have to admit it. And none of these guys have that. So the key is, who's going to be the Republican? I don't know, but Democrats have to win in 28, particularly not just for the country, but also to save the Republican Party from itself.
My view on the Democratic primary of 28 is I say get everybody in. I really think that the widest and most robust primary is going to put the party in the strongest position. And the truth is, there are some people dabbling here or that would be competing for some of the same voters. Like, for example, I think Gavin Newsom, Josh Shapiro, and to a slightly lesser extent, Wes Moore, would be competing for a lot of the same voters. And you might think, oh, well, in that case, only one of them should run. Now, I think anybody who wants to really should run here. And then if AOC is interested, have her run. I mean, I think the point of this is there really should be an evaluation where there are lots of choices. So no one can say we didn't really have a choice from X wing. And that will, I think, put whoever ultimately comes out.
That's why we also need voting reform to ensure people can make their voice heard in multiple candidates. Something like approval voting or star voting will just allow you to give your opinion on multiple candidates on whether or not you approve them. And if your first, second, or third choice get in, I'm sure you're more happy about that than your someone you hate gets in, right? So we need a more representative voting system to make all the value of all these different candidates matter the most.
On top in the strongest position to say, I really won it.
I agree. And I think that happens all the time. I mean, look, it's like putting somebody through the fire. Like, I know when I've had tough elections, I am much better at the art of politics after that tough election because you're forced to do it. You're forced to, over and over and over, say what you believe. You're forced to raise money, which unfortunately is a requirement.
All right. that's pretty much all of that. Per usual, let's look at the comments before we wrap things up. Adam is a stand-up man, true to himself and honest with those around him. Sorry to see that you left Congress because we need more men like you. Thank you for your service. Base. Let me write my comment. What comment should I say? Right? What comment should I write? I have to think of something witty. Let's find or a real Republican. What's harder to find, a real Republican or what's something hard to find? Or not the best, but you know, as a Canadian, I have so much respect for Adam Kintzender. Spoke up, said the truth after Jan 6. Everybody just glazing at him. Nice. All right. I have another video.